Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Sin and Tonic. Today's story is that of Helen McCourt. Let's go. Sin and Tonic! Yesterday was my birthday, so I have got this gorgeous, thank you to my beautiful children, lovely vessel, new vessel for gin. Without further ado, today's story takes us to Billinge, which is a small village near Liverpool. Very quiet, very friendly, typical village vibes. Billinge was home to Helen McCourt, and she lived with her mother, her stepfather and her brother, and at the time of our story she was 22 years old. Helen was very friendly, very kind, very nice to people. People liked her. She was a very loyal friend. She was also described as outgoing and up for a laugh. On Tuesday, the 9th of February in 1988, Helen had arranged to meet her mum and her nan for lunch in town because Helen worked in town, so she was at work, and her mum had to take her nan to hospital for an appointment. So she said, seeing as you're going to be nearby, we'll go and have a spot of lunch together. Nice. However, on the day of said appointment, there was a severe weather warning for storms and, like when that happens, like a yellow warning, or I forget what colour it is. I think it's yellow or red. Rarely red, but severe probably is red. Besides the point, safe. There was a severe weather warning, and her mum decided that rather than hang around in town to have lunch, that she would just head home and take her mum home as well, the nan. Later on that afternoon, having not met for lunch, Helen decided to give her mum a quick call and ask how her nan had got on at her hospital appointment, which is very sweet. And she also asked her mum if she could have some dinner ready for her, please and thank you, for as soon as she was going to get home. So she said that would be around 5:15, because she was then going to head straight out with her boyfriend for an evening out. So that was the conversation that she had with her mum on the phone that afternoon. Helen's commute home from work was a train from Liverpool and then a bus from a train station to home. And that bus stop was not far at all from her house. So she had to train, bus, little walk. At 5:45, Helen still wasn't home. But her mum was not particularly worried at this point because she'd heard on the TV or the radio that there were disruptions to the railway. There always is, always. This was some sort of like incident. There was a tree down on the line. So she wasn't all that worried at this point. She thought, she's been caught up in this train business. It wasn't until about 7 p.m. when Helen's brother arrived home. And he was due home at 7 and he'd arrived home on time. So then Helen's mum thought this was a bit iffy. Why are you home and you have had no issues on the train, but Helen still isn't home? So she decided to call the railway line. I don't know what they're called up there. I think down here it's like Southern Rail, but up there she called the line and they said, oh no, her train would not have been affected by this fallen tree. So she should have been home on time. Panic then sets in. This was a time when there were not mobile phones. Can you imagine? So you're cut off, really. 8 p.m. rolls around and Helen is still not home. So her mum, Mary, and her stepdad start to call people. They call her work. They call her friends. They just want to kind of like, has she gone out? Like, what's gone on? But this was really out of character for Helen. Helen would call them. If she'd have changed her mind and decided to go out for a drink with friends in town, she would have called her mum and her boyfriend. She's got plans with her boyfriend and she's not there for them. She would have called them on a payphone, but she hadn't. They really were worried and they called the local hospitals and then they decided to head out. So they went into Liverpool to look for her. Her brother would stay at home in case she came back to the house or she called the house. So he stayed at home and her mum and her stepdad went out into Liverpool to look for her. After a while, they walked into a police station to report her missing. And at that time, the police were a bit, she's 22 years old. She's not come home for a little bit. Okay, they weren't that worried at the time. The next morning, when Helen had been gone the entire night, the police started to investigate this as a missing person. And because they were quite early into the game of this investigation, all the information is fresh in everybody's minds, isn't it? So it's really different asking, did you see something 2 weeks ago, Tuesday night, 6 o'clock, to last night, did you see something? So they had fresh brains to pick. Ooh, grim. It's going to be hit or miss if I get to the end of this story, because this is strong and yum. Cheers. Happy birthday to me. Happy birthday to you. The investigation showed that eyewitnesses saw Helen get on her train, as usual, her normal train. There was also eyewitnesses to say that she had got off of that train onto her bus, and then again off of the bus at 5:15. And this bus stop was 250 yards from her house. We're talking close. She was seen getting off of the bus and then walking around the corner as if she was going home. So we have a really small window and a really small, location for this disappearance. So she just got off a bus and then within 250 yards of her home, she's gone. That is just terrifying, really. What gets me in these cases is just boom, just how quick these things happen. Because the police are lucky enough in this situation to have a very specific time frame and a small search area, effectively, they begin their investigation by canvassing this small area. So between the bus stop and her house, which is not a lot, they also in this area start to search garages and things like that. So they're having a good, thorough look. And they begin door-to-door inquiries. I have never been part of a door-to-door inquiry. I would crap my pants. I'd probably just... Policemen, I get weird. It's I feel have I done something wrong? And then act like I have. It's ridiculous. Awful. What's that about? Am I okay? You just panic. I digress. So, in this search area between bus stop and Helen's house was a pub. They lived very, very close, and it was called... What was it called? George and Dragon. I knew I was going to get it wrong, because it's George and the Dragon, but this pub was just called George and Dragon. Now, Helen and her brother were regulars at this pub. They lived really close to it, so they were often there socialising, having a nice time. But not 2 nights before. 2 nights before this day, the 9th or the 10th, we might be on the 10th now, of Feb. 2 nights before that, they had been at the pub and there had been a situation between Helen and a drunk woman. Now, this drunk woman had walked past their table and she had spilt her drink on Helen by accident. So Helen, there was no animosity at this time. She was like, oh, she's drunk. I mean, a bit annoying, and she spilt her drink. I'm speaking like I was there. This is what was told. So Helen then took herself off to the toilet to dry herself off, clean herself up. And at this point, this drunk woman then came into the toilet. She came in and she started an altercation with Helen. Helen saw this coming and she grabbed the wrists of this woman. And there was a general sort of scuffle about. I mean, I would be so scared if that happened to me, but this is what happened. The landlord of the pub, he was called Ian Sims. Now, he came into the women's toilet to separate this to-do. I think Ian barred the drunk woman, but he might have also barred Helen. I'm not entirely sure, sorry, but there was some barring going on. You're barred! For life! Arr! Because the pub was in this search area, the police obviously went in to speak to Ian, and they had heard about this story, about what had happened a couple of nights before. When they spoke to Ian, it did not go well. During the course of their conversation, Ian started to freak out. He started to hyperventilate and just pure panic at their questions. Now this looks frickin' suspicious. Because of this behaviour, the police took him into the station to be questioned. I'm not surprised. At around the same time as this, 15 miles away, so in a different area, different police zone, I don't know the words, a dog walker found a pile of clothing, weirdness. It included pillowcases, a man's sweatshirt, socks, jeans, towels, and it was all crumpled up as if someone had just sort of stood there and taken everything off. And it was covered in human blood. I say human blood. We didn't know that at that point, Sophie, but it was covered in blood. The sweatshirt had a Labatt across the front. Labatt. Shia LaBeouf. You know when you just have words that you like to say? Labatt. Shia LaBeouf. Dog walker calls police. They go and they collect up this suspicious evidence. But this was Cheshire police, not the police that are dealing with the disappearance of Helen. Otherwise, things may have moved a little quicker. Back at the station, Ian is asked numerous questions about the night that Helen had disappeared. He explained that he lived in the flat above the pub, but he had a family, he had a wife and children, and they lived in a house nearby, but they didn't live in the pub. He lived there for security purposes. Right? Security purposes, also having a cheeky affair. Security purposes. And this is where things just get like he's a case. He said that he that evening met his mistress at 7 p.m, the evening that Helen went missing. Obviously, the police spoke to his mistress and she said, no, actually, that evening he called me whispering down the phone that she shouldn't come until 8:30. She said that when she got to the pub, Ian actually didn't turn up. He didn't come back until 10:20. He'd gone out. So what a useless alibi, Ian. If you are going to lie and you would like somebody to lie for you, you might want to tell him. Maybe he did and she was like, I'm not lying for you. Med. So a useless alibi. It was also noted when they were talking to Ian at the pub and when they took him in for his interview that he had scratches to his neck. He said that these scratches were from his wife because they had had an argument and he had confessed to this affair and she'd gone crazy and she'd scratched up his neck. She said no. When the police informed him that his wife had said that was not me, I did not scratch his neck, he then decided that, silly me, it wasn't my wife, I completely forgot. And then he blamed these scratches on his neck from separating the brawl that had occurred between Helen and this drunk woman 2 or 3 nights before. Handy. Again, they found this woman, drunk woman, don't know her name, and they spoke to her and she said no, there was no scratching. And she said that Helen and herself, neither of them had scratched Ian in this altercation. He's a liar, pants on fire, isn't he, this man? Just trying his luck. Forensics come on the scene. Blood stains were found in different parts of the flat, upstairs and at the bottom of the stairs, and a bloodied fingerprint. Now this would turn out to be Ian's fingerprint in the blood. His car was also searched, and inside of the car they found an earring, the boot. I should be specific, in the boot they found an earring with no back on it, and they also found some blood. I do apologise if you can hear that. I don't know what they're doing, but it's helpful. Do you not know I'm recording a video, please? We'll push through. The earring that they found in the boot of his car, they showed it to Helen's mum, and she identified this earring as Helen's. Also, she identified it as the earring that Helen was wearing, or one of the earrings that she was wearing the day that she had disappeared. Because there was just so much evidence, the police went ahead and they charged Ian with Helen's murder at this point. and kind of unusual at the time because there was no body. They had not found Helen's body. So they were kind of taking a punt, but they did have just so much evidence that they thought, we're going to do it. Ian Sims, let's have a chat about Ian. So he was the landlord of George and Dragon, and I think previously he had been the bouncer at George and Dragon before he became the landlord. I believe that's correct. He fancied himself a bit. He was at one time a bodybuilder and he thought a lot of himself. He also fancied himself as a bit of a ladies' man, wooing the ladies. But from what, reading between the lines, I think it was a bit in his head, a bit cocky, a bit arrogant, and really I think a lot of the time just, you know, they were humouring him. Ian Sims denied murder and he protested his innocence from the minute he was charged. Now that they had charged Ian with Helen's murder, they were kind of desperate to find more evidence, mainly Helen's body. So they put out an appeal, I mean the police, to the public to say, is anyone able to help us search? So search the local area, have a look. Now, bearing in mind that she went, scaresies. I do apologise, it's normally on silent, rude. I am going to read it though because it's from Paul. He is on the road and he has shown me a picture of a burrito. Thank you. I now want a burrito. Where was I? They appealed for the public to come forward and help them search. Oh, that's what I was saying, yeah. So at 5:15, that's when she was last seen, 5:15. And the night that she disappeared, Ian didn't return to the pub until 10:20. So assuming that he has something to do with her disappearance, between 5 and 10:20, we're looking at. So, you know, where could he have got to? How far could he have gone? I'm sure they took that all into account. So they had this area, wider area now, to search for Helen's body, sadly. A lot of people came forward to help look for Helen. But unfortunately, this search, it was quite a big search, it didn't find anything. They were looking in all sorts of places very thoroughly, and it showed up nothing. At this point, the investigation wasn't really going anywhere because they had no further evidence, just what they already had, which was quite a lot, to be fair. However, breaking the case, the bag of clothes that had been discovered by the dog walker, in Cheshire Police, this bag had been given to a forensic scientist because these are the people that look through the stuff and thoroughly investigate the forensics of it. Oh, she's getting spicy. It's the gin. I haven't had a gin for a long, long time. Oh, yesterday, but before that, a long, long time. I had to. It's my birthday. We will deal with the digestive issues later. This bag of the men's clothing and the pillowcases and the towel, that was put on the desk of the same forensic scientist that was investigating Helen's disappearance. So this guy, he had been to George and Dragon pub and he was collecting evidence there because that was their suspected crime scene. So he had been in the pub and then he got round to opening this bag, and inside the bag was the sweatshirt that said Labatt. Shalabuth. So out he pulls the sweatshirt and his brain, his neurons must have been like a rainbow because he had seen Labatt before. Where had he seen it? He had seen it in George and Dragon pub where Labatt merchandise was featured heavily as promotional merch in the pub. Forensic scientist, neurons firing away. He knew that he needed to link all of this blood evidence together. So this sweatshirt and the things that they'd found in the field, they needed to link that to the pub, the blood in the pub, and also the blood found in the boot of Ian's car, and they ideally needed to link this blood to Helen. They didn't have any of Helen's blood. So they decided to use a kind of new process called familial testing. This was, like I say, a new technique at the time in the 80s. So they took some blood from Helen's mother and Helen's father, and they tested that blood, the blood that they'd found on the sweatshirt and in all of these other places. They tested that, and it showed that that blood belonged to a child of Helen's mother and father. So that's pretty conclusive that that's Helen's blood. In the process of the investigation, further witnesses came forward, and they spoke to more people involved. So one witness came forward to say that he'd walked past the pub on the night that Helen had gone missing, or the early evening, and heard a woman's scream, and that it was cut off like abruptly, like someone had put a hand over the person's mouth. The restaurant next door to the pub, they heard cleaning. They could hear someone cleaning. And this was unusual because most pubs are cleaned in the morning, early in the morning, and they noted that that seemed unusual. Also, the police then spoke to the cleaner of the pub and said, anything unusual the morning after Helen's disappearance? Yes. She came in to find Ian Sims looking a bit worse for wear and scrubbing the pub. He said that his dog had some sort of accident, made a mess, and he was cleaning up because he didn't think it was fair to leave it for her, fair dues. She also noted that he had bought extra black bin bags and extra bleach. Dog walkers have a lot to be praised for. Honestly, they do, because around this time in the case, about 20 miles away, a different dog walker, found some stuff. They found Helen's handbag, and inside of this handbag was Helen's ID. So they called the police, and the police came. They then searched the area around where the handbag had been found, and they then found most of Helen's clothing. They found the other earring, and they also found an electrical flex, like a length of that, which was fashioned into a noose. It's a rather warm day. I'm getting quite warm in the shed. Must get the fan out soon. The clothing and the earring were identified by Helen's mother. This included things like her coat, her scarf, and some mitts. She had green mittens on. Somebody had brought her, I think an ex-boyfriend's mother had brought these mittens for her from Canada. So they were like a gift. They were there. And also her spare shoes. So she had taken shoes to wear to work, and then she also had boots. Not long after this, a bit further away, a shovel was found, and this shovel was also linked to Ian Sims. And it blows my mind because there's nobody still at this point. They had not found Helen's body. So Helen's family went into this desperate search for her body, which is horrific, isn't it? But they desperately wanted to find her so they could lay her to rest. They'd all sort of come to, what's that word? Accept that she was probably not alive. And they searched, it was extensive, and this was her family. They were searching canals, they were searching sewers and things like that. Not a pretty job at all, but they were really they coordinated this search between them, and they were searching high and low for Helen's body. They even went into a mine shaft. All this time, Ian Sims in custody. He denied any involvement, so he wasn't speaking, he wasn't saying where Helen was. In February of 1989, the case went to trial, and this was the first trial in the UK where they used familial DNA in the absence of a body. So they had to prove that Helen was dead. They also had to prove that Ian was the person that had killed her. The prosecution painted a story of what they believe happened that evening. They had a lot of evidence, to be honest, to use. The only thing that was alleged was what happened in the moment that Helen went missing. They believe that they know she got off the bus at about 5:15, and then 10 minutes later a woman's scream was heard from George and Dragon. They believe that in those 10 minutes Ian had beckoned her over to the pub to talk to her about what had happened a couple of nights previously. And between then and 10 minutes later, when somebody heard her scream, they think that they were discussing that incident and that he lured her into the pub to the bottom of the stairs that lead up to his flat. Blood evidence then shows that the attack started here at the bottom of the stairs and that she was then assaulted, attacked, dragged up the stairs, dragged through the landing, and then they believe she was strangled with the electrical flex that they found. The electrical flex had some of her hair on it. Blood evidence also shows, and the earring, that Helen was then, her body was then placed into the boot of Ian's car, and that he then drove that car somewhere to dispose of her body. He says that the blood belonged to his dog and that his dog had cut its paw and that that's what the blood was. But they proved that this blood belonged to a human, not a dog, and that it was almost like it was the blood of a child belonging to Helen's mother and father. They also found carpet fibres on Helen's coat that were from Ian's flat, so that's why they think she'd been dragged across the landing. And they also found dog hair on Helen's coat, and that dog hair was matched to Ian's dog. The green mitts, they found fibres from these green mitts that you cannot buy in the UK, they were from Canada, in Ian's pocket. So at some point he had these green mitts in his pocket. Ian's answer to all of this was that he had been framed. Somebody had broken into the pub. Where were you then? Where were you? No, he doesn't say where he was, but somebody had broken into the pub and lured Helen into the pub and murdered Helen in his pub, wearing his clothes, and then stolen his car to dispose of her body, and then dumped the stolen clothes and brought his car back and then cleaned up after themselves. Good one. On March the 14th of 1989, he was found guilty. He has maintained his innocence, and that means that a number of things. Mainly, it means that Helen's family still, to this day, have not found her body, and it is just like a living torture for her mother and her family. It's horrible, and they just want to lay her to rest. They just want to know where she is, and he's never ever said a word. He did some sort of case review, like not an appeal, I don't think, but a case review, and actually it backfired on his ass because it showed, now that we have progressed in our, what's it called? Like technology, they tested again the blood, because in a case review you look at all the evidence again, and it showed even more so that this was probably Helen's blood. So it was like, oh, you fool. Anyway, in 2013, they actually excavated a grave locally because it came to light that this grave had actually been open on the day that Helen had gone missing. And I was like, yes. No, they excavated the grave and there was no other body in the grave or whatever. And yeah, so that was fruitless. So frustrating. What a case. Where is she? They did other things where they went to a field and sort of used diggers they have tried to find her, and he's just not speaking. It's so frustrating, isn't it? And also with this one, it's like, why? It's just random. Some people say that they heard him talk about Helen, like that he didn't like her, he hated her. So, but other people said, no, we don't think he hated her, and that apparently at one point, he said, and this is interesting. He said, I didn't hate her. At one point, we had brief, intimate encounter. So, this is purely speculation, but I wonder whether Helen upset his ego whether he came on to her or something like that and she rebuffed his advances. Didn't fancy that, and therefore he was very cross. People have killed for less, haven't they? But yeah, it just feels like there has to be something to it for him to have that much anger towards her. What happened that night, the 2 nights before in that toilet? Did he feel like, this is again speculation, but it's so hard when you don't know all the answers, isn't it? My mind goes, ooh, what? But did he feel like he'd rescued her, damsel in distress, and then she was like, get off, no, maybe, who knows? All my little gut just was like, oh yeah, feels like that's what happened, but we don't know. Lots of anger towards her though, isn't there? Enough to lure her in, strangle her to death, and then really make no effort other than, I suppose he did make effort. He went to different locations to dispose of her stuff and his stuff and had a clean-up of the flat. But sloppy. He was sloppy. I think he tried to make it obvious as well, like too obvious, because he said, if I'd have done it, why would I have left my clothes in a public place to be found? So maybe that was his, genius idea. Who knows? Where is she? I had a thought then, it's drifted off. Also, without Helen's body, there's no way to really know fully what happened in those moments, in her last moments. Also, there were pillowcases found, with his clothes that had been dumped. So, did something else happen? We don't know. Anyhow, that is all I have for you on today's case. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Sin and Tonic, my birthday episode. Cheers. I do hope you can join me next week for another true crime story and a delightful rainbow vessel of gin. I had a beautiful birthday. Thank you for all the birthday love. It was lovely. I went to watch Jurassic World Dominion. Is that what it's called? Jurassic World 3, I'm going to say. I literally have so much. I am obsessed with Jurassic Park, Jurassic World. Love it beyond belief. And I was so excited to go and see it on my birthday. Oh, I was like a kid. Could not wait. And it did not disappoint. I loved it very much. I just love them. I love the films. When you feel a bit poorly and you just want to curl up on a sofa and watch something homely? Jurassic Park, the first one. That's me. Weirdo. Yes, it was beautiful. Thank you very much for your well wishes. It was a lovely birthday. I need to vacate the shed. It's far too hot in here. Fan next week. Remind me, please. Fan. I might write a note somewhere. Fan. Because it does get a bit toasty in here in the summer months. It's been a pleasure, as always, and I will see you next week. Bye.